Hey guys! Today's video is dedicated to all you college-bound students. The transition from high school to college can be quite daunting, and it's most likely your biggest one to date. I definitely remember feeling really anxious and having a million questions like, will I be okay being away from home? Will I do well in my classes? Will anybody even like me? So I'm hoping in this video to share with you some tips for making that transition as seamless as possible, and I want to help set you up for academic success in college. I want to start by sharing with you a few of the facts that I just found to be super shocking. And the first is just how expensive textbooks can be. Each of your class is going to require at least one textbook, and sometimes it's written by your very own professors. But brand new, these books can cost upwards of $200 each. So I highly recommend, where possible, get yourself a used copy of the textbook or even an older edition of the book, right? Those tend to be a little bit cheaper. Now, there are several ways you can get a hold of these used textbooks. You can search online on retailers such as Amazon and eBay. You can also check your student bookstore. So on our campus, we actually had a dedicated used student bookstore. And I loved this place because they separated out the books by course number. That way we knew we were getting the right book list. You can also check with peers who had taken the class in the past. I love doing this as well because I found that this gave you the greatest negotiating power, because those books are not going to be as useful to those students. So you can get a pretty good bargain that way. One caveat here is if you're using an older edition of a textbook, I just urge you to always check with your professor. Normally, professors have no problem helping you save a buck. But if there are major revisions to the textbook, or if the problems are totally different, you just want to make sure you have your bases covered. So check with your professors first. The second thing that took a little bit of getting used to was just how big these classes can be. So I came from a high school where the max class size was around 30 students, while in college, especially for some of those introductory classes, the class size can be up to 500 students. So I remember taking these macroeconomic classes, and they didn't even take place in a classroom. They took place in an auditorium. In a class that big, your professors most likely will not know your name. If you are legacy and you have a sibling who was a superstar, maybe your professor will recognize your last name, but I honestly wouldn't count on it. What I would recommend you do to try to build some of that rapport is to attend office hours. Every professor has dedicated time every week for their class for office hours. This is where students can just walk in and ask questions, engage with the professor in a more personalized setting. This is also super useful if you are interested in this discipline and eventually doing research. Your professor themselves have a lot of research experience, but also they're very well connected in the field, so maybe they can connect you to one of their peers. And you may not get these opportunities right away because it is really difficult to find good research opportunities, but at least you're building that relationship and you never know what might come along. Okay, guys, the third thing that was really hard to get used to was just how difficult it was to maintain a high GPA. So in high school, even though a part of your grade certainly comes from test grades, right? A whole lot of your grade also depends on your homework and projects, and sometimes your teacher, if they're nice, even give you extra credit. That is very unlikely in college. So a typical college class, your homework may make up about 10 to 20% of your course grade. The rest of it come from your exams. We're talking about the midterm, the final, and occasionally you'll have one or two other exams. So with that said, what it means is exam grades matter a lot, so I wouldn't recommend you cram right the night before the test. I know this is kind of a common practice in high school. In college, you just don't want to risk it, because if you bomb one test, it becomes very difficult for you to make up that grade. So the main takeaway here is don't procrastinate. But how do you develop that good time management skill? And that's what I want to talk about next. So college is likely the first time you have full autonomy over your time and your schedule. And this can actually be a double-edged sword. Some students, they relish their new freedom so much that they neglect their studies. And again, it just becomes a little bit hard to catch up in college. So one way you can help yourself reduce the tendency to procrastinate is to reduce the friction it takes to study. So what I mean by that is you want to minimize the amount of effort it takes for you to actually stick to your plan. One of the biggest things you should focus on in college is actually attending lectures. You just don't want to get in the habit of skipping lectures because a lot of times there is going to be important information that is shared that will show up on your exam. So, how do you make sure you attend class? Well, for one thing, you can ask yourself, am I more of a morning or a night person? Okay, this is not a question I ever considered until college because let's be honest, high school started at 7:20 a.m. and if you didn't like to wake up and you couldn't stay focused in your first period class, that's just too bad. Okay, you got to do it anyway. Well, in college, you actually have a good amount of control over when you take classes. So what I advise you do is take a look at your calendar and really examine all of your obligations, your social activities, extracurriculars, and work obligations. And then you want to consider if you're more productive, alert, and focused in the earlier hours of the day or into the night, right? And based on that, you can try your best to plan your classes to suit your own preferences. Another thing you should definitely do is try to have a dedicated and organized workspace. So if you're somebody who likes to study on your own in your dorm room, that's totally fine. But just try not to study on your bed where you're also sleeping and watching Netflix because you're going to be very easily distracted. What I would recommend is have a desk and try to have a relatively clear space so every time you sit in that chair, you know it's time to get to work. Same thing if you like to study in a more public setting like the library, try to have a consistent spot that you go to so that again, the environment triggers you to stay focused and work hard. Next, let's get into some more of the specifics about how to build a good study habit. Let's talk a moment about note-taking. I actually have a whole video on my channel dedicated to note-taking and this topic because it's so important. But in this video, I just want to acknowledge physical versus digital notes. So here's my personal take. For humanities classes, English, history, right, where you have to capture a lot of information very quickly, I recommend you capture those digitally because it just goes by a little bit faster. But for classes like math and science that are much more formula heavy, I actually prefer to take notes by hand in a physical notebook. This way it's just much easier to capture information. I can write down the examples and circle and box things much more easily. So if you are in the market for a high quality notebook, I do recommend you check out this line by Hamlin. You can tell it's very sturdy by its hardcover. Hamlin is a very well-known company in Europe and beyond for making very high quality study tools. So this notebook is an example, and what differentiates their product is that you can take your notes by hand but then digitize it using their app called the Scribsy app. Scribsy recently added a new feature that I'm really excited about. It's their note sharing option. So you can now very easily share your notes with your friends who also have the Scribsy app. And this just introduces a social aspect to learning that can be really important. And we're actually going to talk more about this a little bit later on. In addition to notebooks, Hamlin also has these flashcard products, which is really great for classes that require a lot of memorization. Maybe you're learning a lot of formulas, key terms, or facts, and in those instances, flashcards are going to be your best friend. Just like their notebooks, you can also digitize these cards and then study them on the go. So there's a lot of flexibility in using these products. Thank you so much to Hamlin for kindly sponsoring this video. And for my audience, if you're interested in any of these products, I'm going to link them in the description box below. You can check them out on their website directly. And I will also include a promo code for 20% off all Hamlin products. In addition to taking good notes, it is also very important that you do all of the problem sets. I know I said that homework is a very small portion of your grade, but that does not mean problem sets are not important. In fact, they are critical for you practicing the skills and mastering them so that you can ace those exams. So please do not forgo doing these problem sets. And finally, let's talk about making learning social, right? I mentioned earlier how important it is to kind of involve your friends and make this a little bit more interactive. So there are those specific tips I want you to take into account. So when you are studying in a group, I believe it is very important that you do some prep work ahead of time. Please don't show up unprepared just trying to learn from everybody else, right? Just don't be that guy nobody likes them. Like, if we're being completely honest, right? They're just taking up everyone's time and kind of wasting it. So you want to make sure you do your homework ahead of time. You do the problem sets, you come with specific questions, and what you can do is you can take turns teaching each other the concepts. I find that to be the best way to learn, to solidify all of that information so you can ace that exam. You guys, everyone told me that my college years would fly by, and you know what? They were completely right. Work hard, prioritize your studies, but please do not forget to enjoy yourselves as well. College is a time for self-exploration, gaining independence, and making lifelong friends. So please make the most of your time there. I know you're gonna love it, and I wish you all the best. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell. Give the video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. If you like this content, could you just let me know in the comments that this is something you want to see more of, and I will definitely deliver on that. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to catch you soon. Bye-bye!